What's going on, movie fans? My name is Michael Weer. I like to talk about movies, and today we are going to talk about the latest Dracula movie that just hit theaters. That's right, we're talking about The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Now, if you've been following my channel at least since the beginning of the year, you know that this movie is on my most anticipated movies of the year 2023 list. It made it right at number 10, just cracked the top 10. It was either this or like Indiana Jones or The Flash, and it was a toss-up, and I was like, well, I'm going to give it to the one that I know the least about, because the story of The Last Voyage of the Demeter is basically Dracula going from his home in Transylvania or Romania to England. And I thought that was really cool. It's a cool concept. It's like, what's he going to do on that ship? And what are the people going to do on that ship if they're unaware that Dracula is there with them? The vampire of vampires, like, what are they going to do? Plus, this is technically right out of the Bram Stoker Dracula story. And this is also from the original Dracula movie. You only see snippets of it in that movie. You see someone tied to the wheel as it crashes into the port. But in this movie, the whole movie is centered around the ship. And so that piqued my interest enough to put it on my most anticipated list. And I had the chance to go check it out today. Now, before we get to the review, I want to say that if this is the first time you found my channel, I would invite you to subscribe to my channel if you like movie reviews, movie talk, or Blu-ray collection updates. I just put a video out this week where I talked about newest movies that I've added to my collection. So I'd love for you to check those out, and I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. Let's do the review for The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
He's coming!
And so, guys, The Last Voyage of the Demeter is directed by Andre Overdahl. And like I said before at the opening of this video, this movie is about Dracula's voyage from Romania all the way to England. And that concept in and of itself was enough for me. I was like, I like the idea that these people are trapped on a boat with the vampire of vampires. It's Dracula. Like, you could put any other vampire up there. If you told me Dracula is one of the vampires that's in this movie, he's going to be the one that everybody's going to have to deal with. That's just how it goes in a Dracula movie. So I was excited to see what they were going to do with this. Then promotional material started to come out of this movie. I love the look of the ship. I love the look of the crew. I love the time and the setting of this movie. And then I love the look of Dracula. Now, we're going to get into all my likes here in a second, but to just give you a little bit more of a synopsis, not only is Dracula trying to hitch a ride all the way from Romania to England, but you also have the crew that was paid for by someone unknown to carry these cargo crates, probably Dracula. He probably signed this deal without them knowing that it was him. And then you also have Clemens, who is a doctor on board, who was in Romania because he was hired to go there, but based on some prejudice that people had in Romania, he had to leave. So he finds a way to get on this boat because he's just trying to get back to England. So that's your setup for this movie. You've got this crew, they're headed to England, they've got this cargo that they don't know what it is, and then slowly things start happening. It starts with livestock, then they find a stowaway on the boat, or who they think is a stowaway, and then people from the crew start going missing. Now, you see what's happening to the crew, but that's it. They don't know what's going on, and so it's slow till they figure out, okay, there is officially something on this ship, and it is taking bites out of people's necks. And that's pretty much the synopsis I can give you for this movie. If that sounds intriguing to you, you should check this movie out in theaters, because it's always good to support the theater experience. Even though today, when I went to the theater, there was a guy chewing popcorn so loud that I moved my seat to the front of the theater to get away from him, because I was in the back of the theater, and I could still hear him chewing. So I know the theater experience is not always the best, unfortunately, but I do recommend you check movies out in theaters first, because I think you get a better experience overall when you see it on that giant screen with that sound system. It's just an experience you can't get anywhere else. Getting into my likes though, guys, the first thing I really liked about this movie would be the look and tone of the movie. I love that they set this movie in the past. Something about setting movies in present day just doesn't work for me when it comes to these universal monsters. If you're gonna do Dracula, you do it in a time where there's no technology, so I love that about this movie. But the look of this movie is also something I really liked. I love the ship. The way the ship looked was so cool. And then the crew, the costumes for the crew, everybody looked the part, and it all looked so fun. And then the crates that Dracula's coffins were in throughout this movie, that was so cool. I loved the look of those. At one point, one of them falls and cracks open and a bunch of dirt pours out. And I was like, of course he's traveling with dirt from Transylvania. Like, that's so cool. Like, I loved what they did with this movie as far as the look. And if we're talking about looks, I gotta talk about the way that Dracula looked, because Dracula looks, I think, the most terrifying I've ever seen Dracula look. Like, you've got the classic Bela Lugosi. That's not terrifying. You've got the more zany, crazy look in Nicolas Cage from earlier this year with Renfield, which I like, but it's not terrifying. And then you've got, like, Van Helsing, where you have the very CGI'd monster mess. And I'm like, okay, not very scary, but I like the monster effect for that movie. Like, he's more formidable in that form. However, in this movie, the practical effects they use on Dracula, yes, there's some CGI, obviously, but the practical effects they use, I love that when he kind of gets to full form in this movie, he's got that bat look. He's flying around. Like, the look of Dracula in this movie, to me, is spot on. Now, I would have liked to see him sort of transform into more of a human look in this movie. That would have been kind of cool if he could kind of flash back and forth. They don't do that. In the original Dracula, you've got Bela Lugosi in human form, and he's Dracula, but he can transform into a paper bat. Now, of course, that's not what I'm looking for, but it would have been cool to see Dracula do that. But overall, I really like the look and tone of this movie. The other thing I really liked about this movie is how they told the story. So you get a glimpse of the end of this movie, the end of the journey of the Demeter at the very beginning of this movie, and it sets the tone for you because now your expectations are set a certain way. And I don't want to spoil too many things, but at the very beginning of this movie, they find the Demeter on the coast, and then they find the captain's log and they start reading it, which brings you to a couple weeks previous when they were leaving Romania, and I thought that was really cool. It was a cool way to tell the story because it lets you set up like, hey, there's going to be some really bad repercussions in this movie for that crew. And so the whole movie you weren't thinking like, okay, how's the crew going to get out of it? Like, you're sitting there the whole time going, all right, this whole crew is screwed. And I liked that. I really enjoyed that. But those are my likes for the movie, and now we got to get into my dislikes. Unfortunately, most of my dislikes lie with the third act of this movie. I liked how the story was set up. I like how the story was told. I liked the look of this movie, but I didn't like how they wrapped this thing up. But before I get into that, I do want to talk about my other dislike. My first dislike for this movie would be the kills. They were kind of lackluster. And what I mean by that is Dracula, when he's killing people, he's got this really cool move where he'll slash someone's throat, or he's just got the classic Dracula where he bites their neck. But outside of those two things, he doesn't do anything else to kill people. And so the kills in this movie, once you see that happen a couple of times, you're like, oh, is that the only way he's going to be able to kill people? And it is. So it would have been cool if he could kill people in different ways. I'm not saying other people don't die in this movie by other ways, because they do, but anytime Dracula's doing the killing, it's one of two moves. He's got the swipe and he's got the neck bite, and that's it. And so I was like, I kind of wish the kills were a little more in depth, or he got a little more creative with the kills. Unfortunately, they didn't. My next dislike for this movie is going to be sort of the plot of the third act and how they wrap this thing up. Like at the beginning of the third act, I'll try to get away from spoilers, but in the beginning of the third act, they figure out that Dracula is now sleeping in one of these crates during the day. And so their whole plan is to wait for him to come out at night. And I understand throughout the movie, they make it very apparent that they don't know how to kill Dracula. Like, just watching Dracula movies my whole life, I know that stake to the heart, the sun, garlic, there's certain things you could beat a vampire with and you can at least ward off Count Dracula with, right? But in this movie, they don't know that. So I'm willing to give them a pass on that. But eventually in this movie, toward the beginning of the third act, they figure out where Dracula is sleeping all day. And they're like, all right, guys, let's wait for him till nighttime when he can come out. And I'm like, but why? But you know where he's sleeping. So I don't know, but that's what they do. And then they wait till his most powerful time, which is darkness. Again, you could sort of understand, like, they don't fully understand what they're dealing with. But as a viewer, I felt like it was lazy. It just seemed lazy. They're like, yeah, we know where he lives, but to make cool shots at night on a boat with fog, we're going to wait till he comes out at night. So it seemed a little lazy as far as that goes. And then there's how this movie wrapped up, and that's where my biggest gripe for this movie really lies. You've got Dracula and the boat sort of crashing into the coast, and I won't tell you what really happens with a lot of the survivors, and it felt like Dracula Untold. And what I mean by that is that at the end of this movie, when everything's wrapped up, they're like, hey, there could be a sequel, and here's how we're going to set it up. And they put people in certain spots. And there's even one guy where I knew they were going to do this, where they were going to be like, and his last name is Van Helsing. And they didn't do that, but that's what it felt like. I feel like somebody somewhere in one of these studio executive rooms was like, what if his last name is Van Helsing? And it almost made the cut, because that was the only thing missing from the end of this movie. It went from a Dracula movie, we're very claustrophobic, stuck on a boat, like, what do we do, movie to, we're going to go get him, and then we're going to find him, and we're going to kill him. And I was like, but why? But why did you do that? Because you could have cut that whole last scene out and just ended it the way they ended it at first, and it really would have been great. But then somebody was like, this movie could make money, and if it does, we need a way to set up a sequel where we can have Dracula go against people again, so this is how we're going to set up the sequel. It just didn't work for me. The ending of this movie really fell flat, and that was too bad because, again, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes. Overall, guys, I'll say The Last Voyage of the Demeter is worth the watch in the theater because there is some really good, creepy moments throughout this movie that they do a really good job with. I love when Dracula's flying in the air at night. Again, the look and tone of this movie is good. So I would say that if you want to experience this movie, experiencing it in a theater is not a bad way to go. I just personally didn't think the ending worked for me, which is too bad because I think had they really solidified that ending, this movie would be a lot higher on my list of movies that I've seen this year. As it stands now, it's a one watch for me personally. I won't be rushing out to buy it on Blu-ray when it eventually comes out. And it's a movie that if somebody's like, hey, should I check it out? I'll be like, if you have time. But that's my review for The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Guys, if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I'll see you next time. Well, guys, we got to the end of another horror movie, and this time it was about Dracula. Guys, if you like this review, I would invite you to check out my 2023 playlist where I talk about all things movies in 2023. Or if you're just a horror fan and that's why you clicked on this video in the first place, I'd love for you to check out my horror playlist right there that I've been putting together since I started this channel. So some of the videos are a little shaky on the quality, but I do talk about all things horror in that playlist, and I'd love for you to check it out. Thanks for watching. See you next time.